Welcome everyone to Hunt the Habitat. A great dog and a shotgun will only get you so far in the uplands. In this podcast, Ann Jandernaw helps us to attain a more in-depth understanding of the birds we love to hunt, their habits, their habitat, and how those change through the year and through the hunting season. Hunt the habitat, find the birds. Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Hunt the Habitat with Ann Jandernaw, brought to you by Scout and Hunt Maps. I'm Steve Blazer, and Ann, how are you doing on a very windy, blustery day today?
Doing good. I'm staying inside for the moment.
That's a really good idea today.
It really is. It's not exactly one of those days that you want to be out and about, out in the woods especially.
No, I mean, it's not that cold here. It's 25 degrees, but the wind's blowing 30, 40 miles an hour here, gusting more than that, and it's just cold out there.
Yeah, last night they had gale warnings out, and it was interesting because you think gale warnings being on the lake, but they had snow squall warnings for us and gale warnings for the lake. So it was interesting. Tomorrow night, it says 8 degrees. It'll probably be 5 degrees here in the morning. It's usually also a little bit colder where I'm at in the woods.
Now, I'll be up there tomorrow night. I'm going to be near the UP border and sleeping in the camper. So I hope it doesn't get down to 8. I'm usually good into the low teens, that little camper of mine. It does pretty well. But there is a point where it gets a little bit cold in there.
Well, just get a big double sleeping bag and shove the dogs in.
Shove the dogs in there with me, yes.
Yeah, and then zip it up.
Back when I had just one dog, that happened. The dog and I would sleep up on the bunk together if it was really cold, and both me and the dog like that.
Hopefully you don't have a windy night where everything starts popping and cracking and you think the whole woods is going to cave in. That was my night last night. One of the dogs starts squeaking, and I'm like, oh, crap. So I go downstairs, and I put Italian Tango outside in the arena, and I'm standing out there, and bam, bam. And it was loud enough, it sounded like a shotgun was going off, but I knew it wasn't a shotgun and where the direction it was coming. And then I'm thinking, oh my goodness, did the roof cave in the shed? And what the heck's going on? It was actually trees falling. Of course, I bundle up, and now I go trotting out again. At least it wasn't wolves this time.
You know, the spoon is not going to help you with trees falling.
No, but it was loud. So I'm out on the edge of the woods, away from the buildings. The wind, you could hear the wind coming, and the snow was definitely squalling around, and your light on your headlamp only goes so far. And it just was like wide out. And I counted 6 crashes in the woods. And it was trees that were just, popping and snapping. And it wasn't from the cold. It's just like you'd hear it. It was loud. And then the whole time, here comes the wind. You can hear it off in the distance. It's getting closer and closer. And I thought, man, this is just great for a scary movie. And so I trudged back to the building, get inside. Wind was shifting from one direction to the other, just enough to really throw everything off. And it sort of cut loose last night here.
Okay, and it's supposed to kind of level out and warm up a little bit now the rest of the week of memory. So it's cold tonight, but back up into the 30s, I think, tomorrow, and I think we'll see 40 later in the week.
Yeah, it's 19 supposed to be Wednesday's low in the morning. So that's not bad.
So this is a rare opportunity this far into the month. So you said Christmas. Are you ready for Christmas?
Yeah, my parents are up in the Keweenaw, so that's, for those that you don't know, that's north of the bridge of Holton, Hancock, up there, that little peninsula that goes out into Lake Superior. So I drive up there Christmas Eve, and then I get the meal ready for Mom and Dad, and then I turn around, drive back the next day in the afternoon, and then I'll have a small Christmas here. Past the point of the gifts thing. Mm-hmm. So it's just a matter of trying to get back and forth between 2 places. The dogs have all got their Christmas gifts ahead of time, and they've already been chewing their bones.
We're going to do a lot of traveling. So we've got the annual Blazer Christmas Fiasco down on a lake near Waukesha, Wisconsin. And my wife's family is in Davenport, Iowa. And we live not too far from Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And we'll have a Christmas here. And luckily, all my kids are going to be in. So it'll be a loud house.
Nice.
Which is what we want. Nice, loud house. It'll be fun. We'll put on way too many miles, but it'll be fun. And we've been doing that for many years. So,
yeah, there's a lot of traveling that goes into Christmas or having guests come into the home. It's a good time of year. I always like Christmas. And of course, there's all sorts of things to eat.
Way too much.
Desserts.
Here's your sweet tooth again. Everybody, the reappearance of Ann's sweet tooth.
Well, I had a customer ask me what I wanted for Christmas. And he was saying, well, chocolate or meats or anything. I said, I like pies.
You managed to do a wonderful segue into what you wanted to talk about today. And we were talking about what do you want to cover? And you said, look, the holidays are here. It presents both opportunities and challenges for dog owners.
Oh, yeah. The first thing that's on my mind, and I'm not trying to yell fire, fire, fire in the theater type thing. But there are going to be some families that are going to be getting together, and of course, the dogs come along nowadays. Because, if you don't have to board them, that's great, and you can bring them. But some of the dogs, this dog flu thing, most of it's boarding, a lot of it's dog park issues. It's usually where dogs haven't been vaccinated and things like that. But even at that, it wouldn't hurt to ask and find out if there's been dogs sick, not sick, where the dog's been. Just think about it. Nowadays, animals, especially pets, they used to have such a small world, really. It was your house. Maybe a trip here or there, but pets go everywhere now. So it can get interesting where all the contact points are, so to speak. And so it's just something. I'm not saying don't do it or be trying to make you scared of anything. Just think about it. So that's one of those things that you may want to consider is how many dogs are meeting in one place. And if they come from a bunch of boarding, who knows what. But it's something to think about.
Okay. What other thoughts do you have? I know we talked, so when we were doing a little bit of prep for the podcast, you talked about kids.
Yeah, a lot of people need to realize that not every dog is suited for children. And most people are really good about that. But the children can be so exuberant and think because the dog that they have at home, they can just throw their arms around and play with it and everything. That might be all new to your dog. And it's like, why is this human doing this? And freak them out. So you got to think about it. Has your dog been exposed to children? What's the interaction been for children, babies, and all of that? Don't use the family as a test subject, so to speak. Most of the time it ends up okay, but knowing your dog, reading your dog, and don't put it in a stressful situation. And knowing what a stressful situation and how the dog reacts and what it looks like and recognize it before it happens.
Yeah. Kids aren't just kids. I mean, it's different if your dog is used to your 14-year-old and their friends as opposed to your cousin's 3-year-old.
Yeah, and I'll tell you a short little story. I mean, my sled dogs, I had a litter of pups. They were born like November. Go through the winter and stuff like that. But they were too young, of course, to race or anything. You just take them on walks and things like that. And it was late spring. And I had some kids show up at the kennel and had never seen children, and they were terrified of them. Yeah, it's just all of a sudden, why is this person short? I've never had that happen with any other litters, but it was like, for those pups, a short person was a big issue. They were afraid. They went and bailed into the doghouse, and usually they're very happy puppies and all that. And they took one look at those two little kids, and it was like it freaked them out. And it was just, the kids usually don't show up till spring because when it gets really cold, a lot of times moms don't take the kids out. That was wild.
And one of my pet peeves with the holidays is that people don't respect your wishes on feeding your dog.
I knew that was coming. I agree.
And that's not to say my dogs never get a treat. Okay, they do. I mean, they live in the house, and I was a bit of a softie, but to a limit and at specified times and places. After we're done eating, this is going to break a lot of rules and upset some people, but after we're done eating, if I want to give them a little piece of something, I'll put it in their dog dish.
Yeah, do it away from the table.
Yeah. Everybody wants to give your dog a little tiny piece of cookie or this. And there's almost no stopping it. If you've got a gathering at your house or something like that, it's really hard to get around.
Yeah, there is stopping it. Put the dogs up.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but that's not fun. It's not fair.
It's not. It's not fair to the dog. It's not fun. They're crying because they want to be with people.
Yeah. And the person that snickers can probably leave the table and head out the door. I remember someone came in and they brought a whole bunch of stuff. And I said, now, if you're going to feed the dog, you probably should think before you step through this threshold of this door into this room. And they go, why? I said, because you can go home. I said, do you know what it's like when you're trying to control 12 dogs from wanting to eat at the table?
Oh, yeah.
And so after a while, my dogs were laying down very nicely. And every once in a while, those eyes would look up like, okay, is there a signal here? Am I reading a signal that I can go to the table? There's got to be something. And the people that were with me, they're like, you weren't kidding. They're just on edge. They're just watching. It says, oh, yeah, it's like a Ferrari, and the motors are idling right now at the start of a race. Don't let anything hit the floor.
Absolutely. And our listeners will snicker at this because if you're a dog owner, you know this already. They are amazing at identifying who is the weakest link at the table.
Especially babies.
Oh, true. Well, yeah. One of the other things you wanted to talk about a little bit was things from a training perspective that you can do indoors. Again, we're getting into the bad weather. After this podcast, most of us will be in legitimately bad weather, maybe, if it ever arrives. But
what are you doing? Testing fate?
I am just...
If it ever arrives.
Well, I like a white Christmas as much as the next person. So...
Oh, I mean, you just forecasted a blizzard.
It'll probably fall on me up in northern Wisconsin over the next 3 days.
No, I'll end up getting stuck with it.
What are training opportunities? When we're stuck indoors or maybe stuck to the yard, what are some training opportunities that we can take advantage of?
I think one thing is when you're hunting, one of the nicest commands that you can have is if you go and you see up ahead that there's something that the dog is moving toward, but farther ahead, maybe there's a bear sticking his head out of the brush. I've had something like that happen one time. And I was able to say, whoa! And I had the tone that they were not used to. And they stopped. And then I called them right back, right to me. And sure enough, out walked the bear. And that all started with the crate. That all started with not letting them barge out the crate, not letting them barge out the door. It all started with being able to control a situation even from afar. You could definitely practice that. It's important to be able to do that. So practice the woah command. Practice having the patience that they just can't barge out when they want to, or they just can't go out the door when they want, that they have to wait there. And a lot of times what I do, if it's not too cold, or say you're going to go into the garage or something like that, I basically have it set up where I will woah them at the door. I will be able to walk past them, which you can think about in the point. Sometimes the habitat isn't such that you can get through it. A line that you've got is right next to the dog. But being able to walk past the dog when it's woed and then go out and use hand signals, palm out flat, pushing back at him a little bit, and, being able to turn your back on that dog and walk away from it and it doesn't move. You can practice that now. You can practice it in the hallway. You can put the dog in the bathroom, go around the corner of the hallway, dog doesn't move. And that is a really good command for safety, for even when you're trying to catch up with that dog, if it gets a little bit ahead of you, for woeing, for like on a bird or whatever. You can practice woah. Being able to woah them in a dead run is huge.
How do you make that transition?
You can do it in the hallway. Dog's at the end of the hallway, starting to come to you, whoa.
Okay.
Then you just start slowly lengthening out. If it keeps coming at you, I charge it, not in a dead run, but charge it right in its face. Dog's going to back right back up into that hallway.
Okay.
Because I'm in its space at that point. And then what I'll do is, if I take 2 steps back and it starts to go forward, I'll have a knee come out. The knee doesn't touch the dog, but the knee, all of a sudden, you're standing there, knee comes up just a little bit, and it's like a push. It's like a momentum of the knee coming up just a little bit, like a reflex, boom, out in front of you. The dog usually takes a step back. At the same time, you got the knee, the command, and the hand. First, you start out with it holding. Mm-hmm. Then you learn to release it a little bit. And I say, okay, whatever your command is. And then stop it in the hand. And then the voice. You're connecting hand, voice, and think of it this. There's like a bubble around the dog. At some point, if you push on that bubble, it pushes that dog back just a little bit. You're invading its space. I mean, if someone comes and walks up too close to your face, what do? Usually you take a step back unless you're ready to have a war with them. Okay. That's what I do is a lot of times. And I practice that in the backyard. I get the dog to come to me, and it's starting to come to me, and I'll yell, whoa. I don't yell, but I get really firm. And I use a firm voice with it. Because this is serious. Because when I want that dog to whoa, I want it to whoa without question. Test I did when I knew I had total control over that dog was when it was on a dead run. And I could yell whoa, and it'd put the brakes on, and it'd stand there and turn its head body toward me or something like that.
Okay.
And it's being able to control the dog with just your voice from a distance. For a hand signal or whatever, but just you're going to have a voice to get its attention, but then you could do hand signals for directions. Little things that you can do to keep a dog sharp. And then don't overfeed them during the winter. They do need to have a waist.
Are you a fan of going to a lower calorie food, or are you a fan of just feeding less food during the off season?
It depends on the age of the dog.
Okay.
So many people, I find the dogs are 10, 11 years old, and they're still trying to give them 30, 20 dog food. And they don't need that at that age. There should be more on of maintenance, is what I do. They got to have something in their stomach. You cut back volume, a lot of times that's just enough to start them trying to find other things to eat. Mm-hmm. You don't want them to eat. But that's what I do. I mean, everyone's different, and everyone's going to have 10 different opinions on this. But I try to fit the food for the age.
Well, I'm going to ask you another training question. Oh, what other things can we talk about in terms of off-season, in-house, or backyard training? What about backing? And I'm going to throw a question at you. It's something that I have to work on this year. I have 2 setters, and I've got one that in a training simulation will back like $1 million. Okay, put the check cord on her, bring her around a corner, bring her around some brush, see the other dog on point, and she'll back every single time. This year, in a hunting situation, she has on 2 or 3 occasions just ripped right through that dog's point, not respected her point at all, and in one case, flushed a bird when she did it. And that's something I'm going to have to work on. It happens to be an older dog. It's an 8-year-old dog. I'm not respecting the younger dog. So I threw at you a specific question, but maybe also generalize a little bit how people can sharpen up backing skills, maybe during the off season.
Take your crates and put the young dog ahead of the older dog. And basically make them whoa in their crates. And what I'm saying is it's going to look like the young dog's ahead of the dog. So the older dog's being competitive. It wants to bust past the young dog. And I would also have their crates set up like that so that they learn to, one, hold in their crates while you walk around. One's ahead of the other. And they can see the other one ahead of the other. And try that.
Okay.
And then learn that you release the young one and make the old one stay. And then you start to be that you can release them by name. And then when you want to really put more on them, you basically, Hazel, okay, whoa.
Okay.
And she stops.
Okay.
So you can only let her take one step, that they know that, okay, I can move forward, but that she learns that she doesn't have to come out of there like a bat out of hell.
Okay.
So puppies that try to barge through it, they find an imaginary crate door. All of a sudden, they're blocking their way. But hallways, I use my body as a barrier, or just a knee. I'm standing there, and here comes a dog, and all of a sudden, I jerk my knee up, like as if I'm going to bring it up to my chest. And all of a sudden, that knee came out in front of me. I'm not kicking the dog. I'm just extending my presence. And it's not what they expected.
Right.
Because they thought they had 5 feet. Instead, now they only got 3 feet. And they'll catch you off guard. They're used to a certain thing happening, but when it changes, it's a good wake-up call for them. Because what they're doing is they're anticipating. So anything you can do to make it so that they're not anticipating the next move. You need to start at the basics. You can't just go off to the point.
Right. Well,
you got to go all back to square one.
They're both steady when they smell a bird.
No, she's not respecting you.
She's not respecting that younger dog when that younger dog's on point.
And that's part of you.
Okay.
That's respecting the training.
Okay.
She's not respecting the training at all.
Okay.
So that's why you got to start at the beginning and reestablish that foundation and then start.
Reestablish steadiness in general?
Yeah. No matter what. Unconditional. She comes barreling around the corner, you yell, whoa.
Yep.
She needs to stop on a dime.
Okay. This isn't necessarily about backing. This is really, we've got to get...
That is part of backing.
It's part of backing, but we've got to get back to woah training too.
Yeah. You start with the woah training because you do the woah training before you do the backing when you think about it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So if it was the other way around, she would expect the dog to behave for her, but it's not. She's taking advantage of a young dog because she knows she can get away with it.
Okay.
So if you saw her coming barreling and the other dog's on point, if you could yell, whoa, and she stopped right there, it would help.
True.
Because that's where you start reinforcing it again. So much of dog work, when you have a problem, it's not just one problem you have, it's multiple problems. It's, okay, she woes when she wants. Okay, if I have birds, that's fine. And if I'm here around you, but, oh, that young dog? No, we're back to play mode. And I'm competitive and to heck with that young dog. Then there's no respect. There's also no respect for the fact of what she's been taught. So go back to the foundation and work up from there. Sometimes it's taking 2 or 3 steps back before you can go forward even one step.
Okay, and there's a lot to what you're saying here in that while by and large she is steady, she is not as steady as my younger dog.
Typically, they get away with it once, and then they get away with it again. And if you're around other people's dogs, it's hard to correct a dog in front of other people. It's because, you don't want to look like you came unglued. But, the thing is it's the difference between a dog all of a sudden going from there. The next step will be after coming in and not honoring and blowing by the dog and bumping birds as well. The next step will be if a rooster goes up in the air and I can jump at it. No. Or like you said, chase and things like that. She's losing respect for a lot of little steps in there. And it's just a matter of taking her back to point A so that you can continue on.
And
Start back with the foundation, and you got her attention, and she is not going to get away with anything. The old dog knows it, and you know we got to focus on the young dog, and the old dog knows it. And I've had it happen lots of times. I've seen some of my old dogs pull like where'd this come from? You know better. So it's just, that's what I would do. Now you talk to other people, they'll have other ideas, but I'd start back with the woeing and being able to walk anywhere around that dog. Then I'd slowly add distractions to it, and have everything that you can. And then eventually I'd add the second dog into it toward the end. I'd stagger their crates, because what would it look like? The young dog gets to go ahead of me. It's just enough so when she looks out the crate, she's seeing the side of that dog, not the front of the dog, or even with the dog. Because it's a lot of times with these dogs is who's got their nose farther out than the other.
Well, yeah.
So if you can, stagger the crates a little bit, and then work at releasing them by name, letting them take a step, whoa, release, whoa, release, whoa, and being able to do drills with one dog while the other one stands there and waits patiently. Because patience is part of this process as well.
Okay.
So,
again, getting back around to what we can do in the home, in the yard, starting to review that woe training is one of the easy things that we can do when the weather's lousy.
A lot of times, depending on what the situation is, kick the vehicles out of the garage, put the 2 crates in there and simulate it with the garage door shut.
Okay.
Because really when they're stalking, think about this as stalking, it's they whoa. It needs to be a controlled release, stalk, couple steps, whoa, so that you can control the pace. That's the big thing. It's controlling the pace of the hunt. I mean, I honestly believe in that. Now, there's other people that don't, and that's okay. But when I was dealing with customers, I had to have the dogs go at the speed of the customer a lot of times. So that's where this is coming from. Not everyone can get to the woods as fast as the next person. And so the dogs had to release at the pace that I knew the customer could move with it. Because as we're releasing and then they stop and get ready to go again, you don't know when that bird's going to come up. And many times I tell the customers, wherever you stop, make sure you take a step back and so you can swing the gun in case it just flushes wild. When I had customers, I wasn't about to tell them, oh, I'm sorry, you can't shoot that bird that just flew. And my dogs had to control if all of a sudden the gun went off. You just didn't go nuts. You waited. So the more distractions you can give to a dog that you're working on the foundation of woe, it's not just standing there. Woe is being able to say it at any time and they stop. Woe is throwing distractions into it and then expecting the same results. It's like sled dogs. With sled dogs, we have a command. It's called on by. And if you're going past a team, you want to say on by, and you want those leaders and the point dogs and the rest of the team and the wheel dogs and everything to keep going on by. Who cares if the dog in the middle of the team growls at your team? If that one dog in the middle of the other team, they growl, next thing you know, you could have a 20-dog pileup with a fight going on. On by means on by, regardless. No questions asked. Don't even look at that dog. You focus on what's ahead and you do what's told. If you have a corner that the year before of the race, we turned to the left on that corner. But now the race has been changed and we're going to go straight. Those dogs from a year ago will remember that last year we turned here. And I'll guarantee you, sometimes you have to put a different set of leaders in there because the older leaders are going to want to repeat what they did last year. They remember from a year ago what the course was. So dogs are extremely smart. So on by means, no, we're not taking that turn this year. We're going to go straight. And on by means just because we're going past the tent that's got all the hot dogs and the course goes by the tent doesn't mean we go in and check out the hot dogs. I had set up a race course and my dogs were used to doing that. I mean, when they were trained down in Lower Michigan, I'd have the semis idling, and I'd run my dogs between the semis and releasing air and things like that, and engines and all that. On by meant go ahead, don't look back, don't look to the sides, focus on what's ahead, because you want no mistakes. So I set up this race, and I never gave it one thought that anyone would have problems with the food tent. and doggone it, I got chewed out because a couple dogs headed for the hot dogs and the hamburgers and all that, teams and everything. And mine went on by. To me, on by was on by. I got in so much trouble with that one. But to me, that's what woah is.
Okay.
Woah, there's no conditions to woah. There's one word, and it means woah. And if your dog is going to try to barrel past the young dog, you should yell, Hazel, whoa, or whoa, whatever works. And Hazel just stops. And Hazel needs to learn some patience. So I think Hazel also needs to understand that in the heat of the moment, there's no exceptions.
Yeah. You're right.
I've had old dogs doing this. So, I mean, the finger's not just pointing at your dog.
Oh.
It's also pointing back at mine, because you could come here and there'll be things the dog does, and I'm like, oh. But it's all what you're going to tolerate. And the problems we have, it's what the dog has found it can get away with. And I don't know why it is, but sometimes it's harder to go back and discipline those old dogs than it is a young dog. At least for me, it's that way.
I agree with you. I absolutely do. I think it's harder to intimidate them because they know you so well.
No, not if you come with it. Come straight at them and back them into the corner, and all of a sudden you take up the whole space in front of them. Okay. I mean, your wife doesn't want to be there because you're going to think you totally lost your mind. But I'll tell you what, when you do something like that, those dogs are like, what in the heck just happened? Okay. I'm not saying these hunters have to be a bunch of loonies.
Well, we are. That's beside the point.
But it's like, they're not used to the in-your-face approach.
Okay.
Most dogs are used to being talked to.
True.
Or a little hand this way or hand that way. It's basically, the more stubborn the dog, the more creative you have to be. And they'll look at you like, really? Is that all you got?
Oh, I've gotten that look. Absolutely.
It's sort of like telling you to toss something at the dog when the dog doesn't want to drop it. He didn't expect that one, did it?
Worked like a charm. It really did.
Oh, yeah. It's a great diversion.
So it's a little tip that Ann taught me because this is my Hazel again. When she doesn't feel she's getting attention and she wants attention, she'll pick something up that she knows she shouldn't have. And it could be a pillow. It could be any one of a number of things. It could be a shoe. She doesn't chew on them. She'll run up to you, look at you, and then run away. And it's really hard not to laugh because, she's not being malicious. She's just saying, play with me. She wants you to chase her because she wants to play. And Ann's suggestion for this, and this was, 3-4 months ago, you told me this, and it's worked like a charm. She said, pick up a dog toy or something heavy and throw it at her butt. And it just absolutely, I don't want to chase her. And it worked like a charm, but she just drops it.
It's a diversion tactic.
Yes.
Hazel, she sounds plain mischievous.
She's a strong-willed dog, and she spent a lot of her life being the only dog. She likes to rough. She likes to play. Sometimes you just can't.
Hazel, the problem child.
Lord, yes.
We all have something like that in our lives.
She's a fabulous bird finder, but she is a knucklehead.
Yeah, I've got a couple of them here that I get a side glance, and it's just like, no, we're not doing this. You get creative and frustrated at the same time. Like, what can I do now?
What else can we work on in the house?
I guess think about the things that are off limits, just reinforce it, but work on your verbal commands, the dog. That's probably the biggest thing that you can do. That, don't overfeed them. because then you don't have to deal with that issue. And work on the verbal commands and patterns. Find the weaknesses in your connection with that dog. Where does the dog not want to listen to you? What is a trigger that makes the dog basically look at you and say, forget it, I'm going to go do what I want. Find out what those weaknesses are and then work at correcting them. But always remember, get them to make eye contact. Focus on you. Mm-hmm. You're not going to implement everything at once. Step back and think of this old dog as a young dog and then work through it. And so that you can take the steps to accomplish what you want. Because in the end, the more in tune you have that dog with you and your needs, and you're with that dog, vice versa, that's a huge safety thing as well. It's like you open the door and to the back of the vehicle, you don't want the dog to come flying out, especially an older dog. You want to wait till you can put it down on the ground. Or what if there's a vehicle going by? You don't want them to push to come out. They got to be respectful that they don't come out until you told them they could come out. It's easy to say this. I guess what I'm trying to say is that, but in the heat of the moment, in the heat of what, I got to be here at such and such time, I got to do this at such and such time, it's so easy to let something slip and say, oh, that one time won't matter. It does matter. And I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to anyone else because, my dogs aren't perfect. It's all what I'll put up with is the problem. And that's sometimes the problem I have is that what can I get away with without going back too far?
Mm-hmm. You know where that not charging out of the kennel really comes in handy is, and a friend and I talked about this, when you're on a trip, let's say you're driving to, in my case, the northern part of the state, you stop for gas and you want to let your dogs do their business and give them a little bit of water. You're in a gas station, okay? So there's traffic, there's people around, there's cars all over the place. And it is nice if your dog is accustomed to having to wait until you let them out of the crate or you lower them out of the crate. You can just see an accident happening in a situation like that.
Yeah, it happens too easy and too quick.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't, if you got multiple dogs, you can't juggle them all at once.
Anything you want to talk about in terms of what's going on in the woods right now? I know we've talked a lot about what the birds do this time of year.
You need to watch what snow you might have be icy. There's a lot of ice up here, depending on where you're at. If you got snow in certain areas and now we got a thaw coming up, the snow is going to be crusty in the mornings, so that can mess up paws. So trim your dog's feet, the hair from around between the toes and the pads. Get it trimmed back so that the snow doesn't ball up in there and they don't get fissures. Fissures are where the webbing between the pads cracks. It is actually very painful. So that's just something to keep track of. The other thing would be, don't trust the ice. You want to keep track of where any open bodies or rivers or streams or whatever are. Some places the ice is halfway good, some places it's terrible.
I had to fish a dog out of some water one time and it was just a little open bit of water in the middle of a cattail slough. It wasn't deep for me, but it was deep for the dog. Was tracking a bird, and of course the birds are really light, and got into some thin ice, fell through, and we had to crunch out there and grab the dog. And we covered a lot. We talked a little bit about training today, and if people have questions, and if they have training questions, if they've got a knothead like I have, I love her to death.
Oh my goodness.
But where should people send their questions?
www.mobilehuntingmaps.com. Go to podcast, tap on the podcast, and scroll down to where you see join the conversation, and you can send your questions in there. Always glad to hear from you, even if it is a knucklehead dog. But sometimes we don't think about the topics that you might be interested in.
And Ann, thank you. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas.
I hope everyone out there have a great Christmas and enjoy the holidays with family and friends.
Always remember Scout and Hunt Maps. Always there for you, whether you have a cell reception or not, and gives you the details you need to be successful. And everybody always remember to hunt the habitat.